Good morning. Here we are at the Uinta County Heritage Museum. It's a little earlier than usual. This morning we are a little short-staffed, and I'm trying to get this in before we begin having patrons come into the museum. So welcome, and excited to tell another story about another remarkable and courageous woman who lived in the Uinta Basin. If you'll recall, our very first broadcast, if you were watching way back then, was about Dr. Maud. And this is another doctor in the area. She served in the Duchesne County area more exclusively than the Uinta County, but her story parallels Dr. Maud's story really well, and I wanted to share it with you today. So we will be telling the story about Lurrine Miles Allen. Her family called her Renee, and others called her Doc. But this will be the story that we have to tell today. I hope you enjoy it. I'll flip the camera. This is a picture of Lurrine when she was going to medical school. She was a very petite woman. She was only 95 pounds and 5 foot tall. She was considered weak and unhealthy, just mousy. She called herself mousy. She didn't feel like she would ever marry because of her size, and so she decided to go to medical school, and so that she would have a career that would be very fulfilling for her, and that she wouldn't mind not being a married woman. Many of those things did change. She was married twice, actually, and so her idea that she wasn't desirable, and also that she was unhealthy. She actually lived to her 90s, and so her earlier expectations of herself and her ability to do things as far as regular women in her family was misplaced. I'm going to be reading from an article that I found in the Salt Lake Tribune in the 60s, or it was in 77 actually. I just see that because it is so well put. Almost 70 years have passed since that Lurrine, who was being interviewed, started this interview, which is just amazing. The reporter says, in the 13-year-old state of Utah, Lurrine Miles prepared to leave home and family for the big city, Chicago. She was about to embark on a career that few women of her day ventured to enter: medicine. No one tried to convince her to stay home. If they had, she wouldn't have listened. She was confident about her goals and her abilities. Almost 70 years have passed since she left for the Rush Medical School in Chicago, but the small white-haired woman easily searched her memory one snowy afternoon for the thoughts and feelings of a time long forgotten. Gently stroking her dog, she reminisced from an easy chair in Salt Lake, the Salt Lake home of her niece. Dr. Miles, who also acquired the nickname Little Doc from patients, looked like anyone's great-grandma, an image difficult to reconcile with that of an ambitious young woman. But a spark of her determination showed through. However, when asked if her sex posed an obstacle to career plans, "I knew I'd be accepted," the 90-year-old woman said firmly. her in of this comment. In Chicago, Dr. Miles' male peers greeted her with indifference, except she reported that when it came time for obstetrical examinations, obstetrical and gynecological education, although primitive by today's standards, fascinated her. She claimed it bored her male colleagues. It was beneath them, she said. But upcoming exams piqued their interest, and they paid me a lot of attention. Her fascination was practical, too. She knew delivering babies would be the staple of her general practice. But asked how many babies she brought into the world, and Doc Miles gave an, "Oh, there's no way I could keep track." Look, that implied thousands. "I guess I must have delivered 4/5 of the Uinta Basin," she said after a moment's pause. There is a book that Doris Burton wrote about the Uinta Basin healers. It looks like this. It is filled with stories of the early and prominent physicians of our area, and there is a section in it about Lurrine. This is a picture of her as she graduated from medical school. She want to make sure that she occupies the whole chapter of chapter 8. So Lurrine went out to Chicago to go to school. It was a 2-year program at that time, and she was very successful and was ranked very highly in her class. There is a picture of the graduating class that was found in some family history that I was looking through. Thought I had a picture of it. Oh, there it is. If you look, there's a lot of people in her class, and you can't, if you get a little bit more close up, you'll see that most of them were men. There are indications of a few women in there, and she's right down at the bottom, the second one from the right. So it was beginning to be a time when women were starting to become doctors, but it was very early in that process. And she was a contemporary, actually, of Dr. Mott, who was here in Vernal. She came to Vernal in 1906. Lurrine's family settled. She was raised in Salt Lake City in a beautiful home next to a lot of wealthy people, having many advantages at the time. Salt Lake had come into its glory by the early 1900s and had a great deal of wealth. And her father, when she was in college, decided to move to the Uinta Basin, and they settled in the 9 Mile area. And when she graduated from college, she decided to come back to Utah and help the people in this area, and decided to move where her family was, and which was a great difference than living in Salt Lake, because she, again, was put into the frontier. It was homesteading. It was like coming to Utah in the very first pioneer days. To come back out to the Uinta Basin was beginning pioneering all over again. And this was in 1905, I believe, that she arrived back into Utah. So it's just amazing to me that there was an area here in Utah that was still so pioneering in its beginnings. Over in the Mighton area and Roosevelt, Duchesne area, there really was not a lot of pioneering until 1905. So they were one of the very first families to come out. She began her practice out here, and there's a story of one of the very first times that she went to help a woman when she was having her baby was when she was in a sod cabin that was raining so much that the water just kept coming and coming and coming, and she was unable to get the baby out of the water, the woman out of the water. It was just coming through the roof onto, and so she was just really struggling, and because of this, she had to grab her umbrella and put the umbrella over the woman, and the baby was born in a fairly dry, because she was able to get her umbrella to help her. But these primitive conditions were so different than what she had happened to her earlier in times before that. Sorry about the telephone. I'm here alone. I'm just going to let it ring. I think it's Lana. I did want to say that she was very confident. She was able, just like Dr. Mudd, she was able to put a finger back onto a person. There was a girl that lost her finger in a recess accident, and when she did so, she stitched it back on. She had the kids go out and find it. They cleaned it up. She stitched it back on, and it actually grafted back, and she was able to use it for the rest of her life. So she was very confident in doing these things that are just even miraculous nowadays, that we just don't always think about people being able to do. This is another picture of her during her schooling days. I love the style, the things that they wore. She married a man named Harris, and he homesteaded down in the Dragon area. She didn't stay with him very long. She found that to be a really difficult time and period for her. So they divorced, and then she met a man, his last name was Allen, and this is a picture of them in their later years. He spent many years driving her to her appointments all over the Uinta Basin. She started with a buggy and ended with cars and had accidents, just like Dr. Mudd. She was a very interesting woman. I would suggest, if you would like to know more about her, that you pick up the book in the library. It tells a lot more of her stories, and she was very wonderful woman. I'm going to have to cut this short because I need to get that telephone. So I hope you enjoyed our Courageous Woman today, and we'll see you next week.